Welcome to the Hunt Backcountry Podcast. Today we are talking about how to thrive on a backcountry hunt. Thriving is about ensuring you have the capabilities, the confidence, the knowledge, the experience, and more to go into a long mountain hunt and to make the most of it, to match your capabilities, perhaps even exceed what you thought you were capable of, and more. And it's a process. It's a journey to get there. It's not about one event. It's not about one aspect. It is a cumulative effort over years to continue to develop as a hunter. And we're talking about these topics in a very conversational way. It's myself, Steve, and our friend Ben Reynolds, who is a very experienced and high-level sheep hunter from Alaska. You may recognize the name, and if you listen to the show, you know he's been a guest in the past. We wanted to explore this topic, the three of us, and just see where it went. We turned the mics on and just had this big picture topic of how to thrive in the mountains and on backcountry hunts, and hit record and just saw where the conversation took us. And it was great. I'm actually excited to listen back to this one myself because I certainly had some takeaways, and I know you will as well. So I hope you enjoyed this conversation. Before we kick that off, I just want to remind you guys that your support means the world to us. We don't have any advertisers or sponsors or anything like that. We're not trying to monetize the show, but we do want it to continue to be successful and to grow. And the best way you can help us do that is just by leaving a rating or review in your podcast app where you can, or sharing the show directly with a friend. Thank you for taking the time to do that. Let's dive into this conversation about how to thrive on your next hunt.
The idea of this entire project is to be able to experience these awesome high adventure, just badass backcountry hunts at a very high level. And I think a lot of the approach at times can be, well, because this does take such a time commitment, what do I need just to get by on a hunt, right? And really want to take that to the next level and not, we're saying basically like thrive, not survive, and meaning like to be able to go do these hunts and be so prepared, so dialed in with every single aspect that you're thriving. You get done with something very, very physical and you're like, I'm ready for more right now. I don't need a break. Like, let's go. And I think all three of us can speak from personal experiences here where like when you get to that level, it's incredible, right? Like you feel invincible. Like you can do whatever you want out there. Ben, I know we talked about your sheep the last time you did your sheep, pack out, and you could tell the stats, but like 45 miles and 40,000 feet of elevation or whatever it was. I mean, something insane. And you were like ready to go, like, the next day. Mark, you and I, you killed your nice 6-point bull last year. We executed that hunt really, really well, packed it out, by all accounts, had like a really tough pack out, got home the next day, and you want to go for a mountain bike ride? Yeah, sure. Let's go. And so that's not by accident that we're able to like do these hunts and, even physically or mentally just be ready to go the next day. So the topic is thriving in the backcountry. Ben, you're on here for a very specific reason because you're someone at, I think, the highest level of executing very difficult hunts at a very, very high level. So yeah, let's just kind of ramble, just have an open conversation today about like what are some of the things it takes to get to that level of truly like thriving in the backcountry.
Yeah, when you said you're capable of doing whatever you want to do, I'm capable of doing what I want to do, but I don't know that I'm capable of doing what Ben wants to do.
Yeah.
Well, when you guys asked me to add in and weigh in on this topic, I really had to sit down and write out some notes and try to think, what does it mean to thrive? and I wanted a framework to start basing my thoughts of, because my mind went in all different directions of what thriving actually means on one of these hunts. And I came up with just um, a high level thought on this that I wrote down, that thriving for me is the purposeful march towards a desired outcome, not being limited by knowledge, strength, endurance, skill sets, mindset, or gear. So that's a high level look to base our conversation off of, to have an idea of what your desired outcome is, and then making sure that every single one of those aspects is taken care of and is at the highest level that you can get it.
Before we dive into those specific points, because they're spot on, they're super helpful. We could talk about each one of those. But before we even get into that, I think it's important to even say having a framework and identifying what's needed is important, right? Because you're not going to thrive by accident. You're not going to operate at a high level by stumbling your way into it. Like it's going to take some intentionality. It's going to take a plan. It's going to involve identifying your weaknesses and improving upon those weaknesses. It's going to involve, refining your strengths and all that. So it'd be super easy, and I'm excited to do it, to talk about what you mentioned, Ben, like knowledge, strength, endurance, skills, mindset, gear. But it really just starts with identifying a plan and having a framework, because what you said at the beginning, Ben, like it's a purposeful march. Like you need to know what the purpose is. You need to know what you're marching towards. You need to know the direction you're headed. Like that's where it starts. Because again, you're not just going to stumble your way into being capable, right? Um, so I just want to point that out before we get, I don't want to miss the forest for the trees, essentially.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And having that outcome in mind is where it all starts, because when you know the outcome and the goal that you are working towards, then that can inform everything you need to do, all the steps you need to take, and areas you need to work on to reach that.
Elaborate on outcome, because I know this from talking with you, Ben, what outcome means to you, but for people who aren't necessarily used to thinking this way, they may just hear this and go, "Oh, the outcome is to film an elk tag. The outcome is to kill a mule deer. The outcome is to go on a sheep hunt," right? But it's more than that. So like even talking about outcome, I've heard you mention, "Hey, the outcome, the goal of this hunt is to execute it a certain way. It's to get into new country. It's to do this." And it's, of course, yes, ideally film a tag, but that's not just what the outcome is.
The outcome when I plan uh, a sheep hunt is, there's the ultimate outcome that you want. You're going in for that purpose of killing a sheep or killing whatever animal that you're going after. But the outcome of the hunt as a whole, it means more to me than just that kill. I want a certain experience out of that hunt. I want a certain feeling that I get looking back at that hunt, knowing that I performed in a certain way, made decisions in a certain way, and had a confidence going into it. And these difficult hunts, I think, need to change us. I think that we need to go in and challenge ourselves physically and mentally. And I think that if we go in there and we're successful in performing in the way that we want to perform, I think those hunts have the ability to change us and allow us to grow in both hunters and in our own selves and in our daily lives. And they can mean more than just a hunt that you go on and then forget about.
I love that you said they to change us, and that's you could talk about. I think you could. It's a very difficult subject to talk about, but you could, really pull the thread on that, and there's so much there. Just like doing the death hike every year, like there's when you push yourself physically and mentally, and when you set a desired goal, desired outcome, and you go and achieve those things, just that trickle down effect to every other aspect of your life. You can't put your finger on it, you can't measure it, but I know for me, it has had a significant impact on who I am. Just the day to day trials and tribulations you go through, you just kind of like, piece of cake. You just shrug it off like it's nothing, where I just see that in my life. I see people around me who are complaining about little things and, oh, it's kind of hot today or this or that, and it's just, I think because we've all chosen to do these very difficult tasks, and when you come out successful, you build this layer of confidence and toughness and just the ability to kind of shrug off when things are difficult or uncomfortable because you know that it's always, for the most part, short lived and it's going to be sunny tomorrow.
I know for myself, I find it hard to articulate how it changes us, but
Yeah.
you know when it does. You know when an event has changed you. You can feel it, and especially these endurance efforts, whether it's a death hike or a hunt, those endurance efforts just really lay bare like everything about you. It's just it feels raw, and it reveals like your innermost like emotions, and you just feel like exposed to the experience. And I think that's where it really starts to change you.
Yeah. It's so hard to articulate that. I don't think I've ever, Mark, you probably have the best chance between the two of us of being able to do that. I sure don't. Like it's
Yeah.
just something that is there and it's present, but putting that into words is not easy.
Super tough. I'm only good at articulating and writing because I have a chance to refine it. So you can't put me on the spot to articulate it now.
I think to go into when we were talking about the outcome of the hunt and what the goal is, some of the notes that I made, I was able to articulate to myself uh, how important that is, to use that to inform the steps you need to take and the areas you need to refine, so that you can thrive. But you don't want to put undue emphasis on that outcome and focus entirely on that outcome. And that's where you really need to examine your motivations of why you're doing this hunt.
Mm.
The motivations that we were talking about, having the experience and letting it change us, and performing well through the hunt so that we can really feel satisfied with it. That's different than if we're just focused on just a trophy or a social media post or a standing within whatever community that we're in, whatever hunting community. And when we put undue emphasis on just the specific goal, I think it leads to not respecting all the steps that you need to take. And then when you don't respect those areas, um, then you're not refining them. Uh, you're not developing those areas. And the hunt is a complex process, all these things coming together in order to perform. And if you're not respecting each of those areas, you're just focused 100% on getting that trophy picture, then you're not going to be able to deal with the complexities, and you're not going to be operating at a level that allows you to feel like you're thriving when you're out on the hunt. And it leads to I wrote down a delusional self-confidence, when you don't pay attention to areas that you should be, and you're just envisioning yourself with this trophy picture. It leads to that delusion that you're going to perform in a way that you probably actually are not going to perform in that way because you haven't given it the respect. Does that make sense to you guys?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I think it's to oversimplify it, it's focus on the process, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
thriving
Yeah.
is about not just the objective, not the end, not the result. Thriving is about every step along the way, literally and metaphorically, every step along the way, thriving in what you're doing, in your decision making, in your actions, and how you're showing up mentally. Thriving is the process. And that process, when executed well, when thriving, when not neglecting, is going to lead to good outcomes. But if you only focus on the outcome, you're shortcutting the process, or you're, you know, making steps that aren't relevant to that.
Yeah, that's a good summary for sure.
Going back to the desired outcome, like that one, I kind of started like my mind was wandering off on like, what is your motivation to hunt? And I think at the core of my motivation is I know when I'm doing one, I obviously just enjoy it and love every second of the experience while we're out there. But there's got to be more, like to your point, Ben, there's got to be more than just getting that photo with the animal or, whatever. Like generally that's the goal out there is kill a big trophy. There has to be more to it to sustain it, to become like maybe you do that once, but then kind of like, next year you do something else. Um, to just like as a lifestyle, like there's got to be more than just getting that trophy. And for me, I just know I'm a better person when I'm doing that stuff. And I think that's a goal of any quality individual is to become better, in all aspects of your life. And when I'm doing these hard things, I know I'm a better version of myself, and these hard things are making me better as the process goes along.
Yeah, I feel the same way too, Steve. That's exactly the reason that well, we each have our own reasons for why we want to embark on these hard challenges, but that's really similar to my own goals, is to experience new things and to challenge yourself beyond what your capabilities were previously, and to feel like you're doing it really well, and you're capable of doing these things safely and efficiently and effectively in the field, and not just barely surviving it, but when you're out there that you've prepared well and that you've trained well, and that allows you to really get the most from that experience, because you've put a lot of emphasis on what it takes to get to that level.
I'm finding it interesting because this is, again, we had this theme, but not necessarily a scripted, like, here's what we're going to talk about A, B, C, D, follow these points. I'm finding it interesting that we went somewhat philosophical, if you will, in this conversation before practical. Um, because on the surface, like, people could hear thriving in the backcountry and think we would jump straight to, like, have a lighter pack, train more, do this tip, trick, technique thing, right? And there's some practicalities to that, but none of those practicalities matter. And this really goes to your point, Ben, of like, none of that matters if you don't have the right motivation to approach things holistically and collectively. So if we just think of like thriving, again, to thrive, you can't really you can't really have a weakness if you want to thrive, right? Like you can't choose to say, I'm going to focus on these two or three things, but I'm going to neglect these others, right? Because you can't thrive if you're not holistically pursuing what you need, right? And so to holistically pursue it, it takes work, but it's ultimately going to take the right mindset that is the motivation for being willing to invest in all that hard work, if that makes sense.
Hmm. I think the key too is uh, to have that mindset of and thinking about what your goals are, outcomes, motivations, because then that will help you inform the specific actionable choices and that you take and make in order to reach those areas. So a lot of people I see, they focus on the gear or the training, and they're really focused on quilts versus sleeping bags, or this caliber versus that caliber, or things that matter. But if you don't have a framework of how that fits into accomplishing a certain goal, then it's really not getting you that much closer to being able to perform and thrive.
I had a similar thought about that. We did a podcast, the Monday Minute that we recorded this morning, was developing like this pie chart of like where you should be spending time and the things that you should focus on and not focus on. And it's like it all matters. The whole pie's got to be made. But I think way too many times it's spent, like you said, sleeping bag or quilt or this caliber or this tent or what. I mean, you could go into any one of these gear pieces, clothing, packs, boots, but it doesn't, none of that matters unless you're executing at a very high level on all the other stuff, like, proper training, proper, techniques and forms, shooting your bow or rifle. Those are the big picture things that truly make a difference, and all the rest is matters, just much smaller piece of the pie. Oh, do you think you can change your motivation? If you're someone who just cares about killing a 200-inch mule deer and that's like all you care about, and you don't care about the experience or anything else, like if you're listening to this and you're that person, is that just who you are? Or is that like do you realize like, oh, maybe this is a work in progress? And I don't know, that thought just popped into my mind of like all of us have that motivation. I can't say that for every single person out there.
I think it comes down to personality.
Yeah.
A lot of people have like that sort of motivation at first, and like what we were saying, these hard hunts, they change us. The experience changes us, and with that change, that's when we start to see what our personalities, what they're drawn towards.
Mm,
And for some people, that I've seen it here in Alaska, people that just want to get a sheep just to kill a sheep. That's
hmm.
that's the whole reason. They don't want to have a life-changing experience. They don't want to do a hard thing. They don't want to progress in those areas. They just want to kill it for that sake, just to be able to say that they've done it or to hang it on a wall. And some of those people, they'll go out and they'll realize how amazing these experiences are, and they'll be drawn to that, and they will change into someone who isn't just focused on that outcome, but they are like us. They want to go out and experience every aspect of it. But then I've seen probably more of those people. They'll go out, and whether they're successful or not, they they're not really drawn to doing something for the sake of the hardness or the challenge. They just can't get past that that outcome based motivation, and they're not drawn to it, and they quit. They do it for a few years and they burn out and go on to something else. So I think it comes down to personality. Of course, we
Yeah.
can change like what we want out of it, but the personality has a big part in that.
I think that's actually how I stumbled my way into doing this stuff, was basically the goal was better elk hunting, right? So then I was like, well, there's better elk hunting the further away you get away from a road, I better backpack in. And then I did one trip. It was a 24-hour trip, and before limping my way out of there, I can't remember what I had. My lower back was really bad back then. Um, Limping my way out of there after being terrified all night that a bear was going to chew my face off. Uh, um, I was already planning the next trip. Like I had this quote unquote miserable experience, but something changed in me on that first trip, and it was like, that's amazing. I need to do this again. So yeah, I think you're right in that maybe your original goal was just killing an elk or killing a sheep, but there's certainly going to be a percentage of the population that something clicks, and then, here we are 20 years later and still obsessing about backpacking. Man, there's a lot of philosophical, like you said, Mark, this has got a little different direction than I thought, but it's, you just kind of open up this can of worms and there's so much there.
Yeah. Yeah. As you were saying that, like one thought I had, friend mentioned something to me like in passing. It was just one of those phrases he said, and it stuck with me. And I've thought about it many ways. But at one point, we were actually talking about hunting, but a different context. But he said, like guys tend to conquer and quit, meaning if they feel like they've conquered something, this appeal to continue dies, right? Because you've conquered it. Like you checked the box, you did the thing, whatever. And I think that shows up with, hobbies for people. Like for some people, hunting's this hobby. And like you said, Ben, they just want to kill sheep or they just want to kill an elk or whatever. And if they do that and that's all they were getting out of it, if it was just about this outcome of doing the thing and checking the box, like they're going to conquer and they're going to move on. They're going to quit. They're going to go to something else. They're going to set a new goal. And that's not wrong. But I think for us, we can't conquer and quit with this pursuit because it's not about checking the box, right? It's about the evolution. It's about who we're becoming. It's about improving. And you can't check that box. You can't just conquer it. And that's why we can't quit, is because it's just this process and evolution of who we are, who we're becoming, how we're changing. And that doesn't fit neatly into a box. We can check off, conquer, and quit. So it's interesting of all that. And again, just me going back to this phrase that I heard years ago and it stuck with me.
Yeah, it goes beyond a surface level experience. It goes a lot deeper than that. Here in Alaska, you'll get lots of tourists showing up, and they'll say, "Oh yeah, we went and did Denali," meaning Denali National Park, or we did this, or we did that park, or that experience. And you don't just do a hunt and then have you. It's if you really dive into it, you haven't just done something. There's far more under the surface than that. You can't just say I've done sheep hunting because there's so
Right.
many aspects to it and it's constantly changing. And I think it's good for people to find whatever that is, whether even if someone tries backpack hunting and backcountry hunting and it doesn't appeal to them. I think it's important for people to find an area that they can really dive into and go beyond the surface and from an experience, because it's so valuable to really work towards mastering something and not just glossing over it um, and no matter what the pursuit is.
Okay. If you're still listening to this, you're not like these guys are full of it. Uh, um,
Therapy session over. Is that what we're
therapy
doing?
session over. Yeah. Like, what's how practically do you get to this point where you're thriving in the backcountry? Because it's a process. And it doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen in year two, year three. Doesn't I mean it's a process. And I think you've got to know that, understand it, accept it, and just start working towards that goal, that outcome.
hmm Yeah, I mean, just a very practical example of that. That's so, I mean, it's fresh to me, right? As I had the Dall sheep hunt last year, and the sheep on the wall is not about the sheep on the wall. The fact that I killed a sheep is not about Instagram or any, like you were talking earlier, Ben, about the motivations. When I look at that, not only that animal now, you know, the sheep horns on the wall is just a reminder. When I look at that hunt, it's meaningful because it's what you're just saying, Steve. It was like the culmination of, I could not have done that 10 years ago.
Mm.
It, I couldn't have, period. Not about money, not about whatever. Like I was not capable physically, mentally, anything to have to stick through what it took and all the setbacks of that hunt and the difficulty. Like I could not have done it. And so that's why it's meaningful to me. Like, yes, I put a value on the animal. Yes, I respect the animal, but it was just very fulfilling to me because it was like a good example of, yeah, I didn't just survive that. Actually, through the setbacks, was thriving. But as you said, Steve, that's a process. So yeah, let's talk about the process. I was just sharing all that as a very practical example of this is real to me because I definitely was not capable of that years prior. And it is a years long process to do some of these things. But yeah, let's maybe just let's go through the list, Ben, that you jotted down. Maybe this isn't exhaustive, but they're all great talking points. You mentioned to thrive, you cannot be limited by knowledge, strength, endurance, skills, mindset, or gear. So we can get a little more practical uh, with each of those, maybe riff on each of them a little bit. And again, they're all gonna play. People have different strengths and weaknesses in this list. Um, we can definitely go through them though. I mean, knowledge, I think just to start there, one thought that I always come back to with knowledge, I think I'm just maybe a little sensitive to it because of our podcast is as much great information that there is through anything content wise, be it this podcast, be it a YouTube video, be it, an online course, whatever, that's all valuable knowledge, but knowledge is invaluable or actually unvaluable if it can't be applied. So you have to take knowledge, you have to take what you hear, what you listen, what you theoretically quote unquote learn and pair it with experience in the field. And this goes back to why it takes time, right? Like you can read all you want, listen all you want, watch all you want. You still have to get in the field and put some knowledge into practice.
Yeah, I think it starts with making a list of the different areas that are involved in hunting. Like just like I made this list of these key principles, and with knowledge, I think you need to start taking notes, whether that's mental or on a page, and seeking out information about the very specific areas that you're going to hunt, the species, and looking for experts in that field, people that are knowledgeable. And oftentimes you get the most actionable advice and information from someone who is just a little bit better than you, not someone that may be the absolute expert in a field because they're operating at such a high level that it may be hard for them to distill down that information into a way that you can actually take action on it, not just speaking to it at a very high philosophical level, but giving someone that's just behind them in their experience because they've experienced it recently. So just reaching out to people, whether that's in the fishing game agencies or other hunters, or looking into people that travel and recreate in a specific mountain range, for instance. You guys are going pack rafting here in Alaska. So a really good example of that would be reaching out to those in the adventure pack rafting community that may have done a wilderness classic race through that area or have done that float just for the sake of having a paddle adventure, a pack raft adventure. And so doing those sort of things you're able to get really good knowledge and information that's specific to where you're going.
What do you think knowledge development, Steve? What comes to mind for you?
Yeah, I mean, knowledge can be applied to all areas of what we're talking about here. Like knowledge, I mean, you can take any single part of it and break it down. I mean, just knowledge about that specific species. Ben, you kind of went to knowledge about location, things like that. I mean, knowledge and skill set would kind of blend here, but just knowledge how to hunt, knowledge of animals' behaviors, knowledge of how to use your gear. Like it's probably I guess it's you probably I don't know if it was accidental or not, but the fact that it's number one is on this list makes a lot of sense because it just applies to everything and nothing will happen overnight. And to your point, Mark, like it's one thing to listen to it, but to actually process it and then apply it to your own use case, that's where you have to be mindful and figure out ways that you can apply it. Yeah, and it just takes time. takes diligence. Mine's going all sorts of places right now. Yeah.
I think it's just a matter of being like open-minded and hungry for it too. Like going back to your point,
Hmm.
Ben, of not just thinking inside the box of, oh, I want to go on a pack raft hunt. Like, so I need to look at just hunting trips, right? Like, no, get outside of that and look at people who've pack rafted just a pack raft. But even to extrapolate further, there's so many lessons we can constantly be learning and pieces of knowledge we can pick up from people in unexpected places, right? People with different experiences, sometimes picking things up from you may pick up like a thought, a mindset, a tip, something unrelated to hunting that you can apply to your hunts. So it's just I literally think part of it is just looking for it, being
Hmm.
open-minded, being hungry for knowledge and just thinking, right? Like just looking for ways to go, oh, like I think you're actually a good example of this, Steve. Maybe not, publicly on the podcast, people may not pick this up, but just knowing you personally of, sometimes you get ideas from way unrelated places that we can
Hmm.
apply to hunts or to the podcast or to EXO or whatever, right? So I would just say knowledge, yes, put it in the field, but don't limit where you can find knowledge. Just be open to it and kind of constantly be hungry for it because sometimes you just get really good ideas, thoughts, information from unexpected places.
I guess, and it starts too with just identifying. In order to acquire it, you need to be looking for it. In order to look for it, you need to know that you need it, right? So
Hmm.
I need knowledge about pack rafting. Okay. I'm gonna go look for it. I'm gonna be, when I'm not actively looking for it, it's gonna be in the back of my brain and I'm gonna see something and go, oh, that'd be cool for, to be able to apply it to this. So just simply, if you're just starting out, you're gonna have a really long list of I need to know how to, you know, set up a tent. I mean, how to you just go really, really basic with stuff, but you need to just jot these notes down so that you're at least processing, here's the things I need to learn, um, and then go out and acquire that.
And I think that you don't need to necessarily have all of these things completely dialed in your mind of how to do everything because, like you said, Steve, you have a long list of things that you don't know that you need to ask and need to learn from people. But that list it may feel long at first and it may feel like overwhelming to get started, but you just need to like go forward and start the process because that list actually is short compared to the information and the knowledge that you'll need later on, because you don't even know what questions to ask until you've actually experienced something, and you don't know that you'll need countless different skill sets throughout the hunt until you actually experience that and
Mhm.
realize what questions to ask people.
Yeah, we've all been doing this for a long time, and I'm learning new things every day. It's a process, and it never ends. But you got to start somewhere.
Yeah, there's a huge aspect of like humility, right? Again, to like stereotype some, men of sometimes we project like, oh, I should know this or I do know how to this, but really to learn and to gain knowledge, you just have to be humble enough to go, hey, I'm an idiot. Like, I need some information. I need to learn from you. Like a perfect example of just a few days ago, I went fishing with somebody and they were fishing a river I had not been on, and they were using a method of fishing that I'd never done. And it's like I could go into that go with this attitude of like, oh, I've fished before, I've fished for the species, I've done this, I've done that, which I have done, but I've never fished this place in this way. And so I just was like, we were driving there. I flat out told him, I was like, dude, treat me like an idiot. Treat me like I've never fished before. Like I've never done this in this place in this way. So like I just want you to know off the bat, like I want to learn, right? And if you don't have the humility or you're going into something with like I could have gone into that experience with, well, I fished before and we should try this and I should do that. It's like, dude, that's all wrong. Like, just be humble because you're not going to learn if you're not open to knowledge and if you're not humble enough to admit, like, I actually don't know what I'm doing right now.
Yeah, that's really key to keep an open mind and to stay humble. As an exact or as a specific um, example of that, I was recently doing a lot of long range shooting, and I was having trouble just understanding why my Revic BR4 rangefinder was giving me a different solution than the Revic app. And how that was a little bit different than the ice snipe app I was using, and so I dove into looking at the altitude settings on those, and it's you think you know something, but having the curiosity to dive in a little bit deeper. Do you guys know that there's six types of altitude, and there's indicated altitude, absolute altitude, true altitude, density altitude. There's all these ways of reading altitude, and that affects ballistics. Most of those are for aviation, but density altitude is can be way different than your true altitude, as referenced on a topographic map. So just having a curiosity to learn more, to refine what you're doing.
What's some practical things that you guys have done, big picture wise, to acquire knowledge? And I'll probably, I don't know, 15, 16 years ago, I'd been hunting for 5 years, been successful, but it wasn't, just kind of average. Just I worked my ass off to kill one elk a year. And I just realized, man, I could learn a lot from other people. So I just made it a goal to just be around other hunters who I knew were successful. I asked questions. I invited myself along, right? Like, hey, can I come tag along with you and go elk hunt for the weekend? Like I'll just come pack. So that was like, to me, a practical example of what I did early on was just surround myself with people I believe to be, experts. And I learned a lot, right?
Hmm.
And picking up on, well, this person's successful and they hunt, a lot of it's processing this like post event processing, right? Like I just did this, jot down notes. I never jot down notes, but physically I just do it in my mind. Um, but like, well, this person did this and they were successful like that way, and this person's also successful, but they hunt a different style. Like, what are the things that I think I can apply from how they hunt and how this person hunts to my own style of how I want to develop as a hunter? And I was very, I don't want to say meticulous, but very thorough on like I want to be a better hunter, and you know obviously still doing that to this day. So what's some areas for you guys? Whether it's just did there's so much information out there that these days that's none of that is lacking. So where do you go get information from?
I'm curious to hear what you have to say, Ben. Like most of what I would say is similar to you, Steve, of forcing myself and looking for opportunities to be around other people to see and to learn, essentially show up and shut up, right? Like, and that may mean I think a great example would be for someone listening to this, like say they wanted to get into elk hunting. Don't put more focus on finding someone you who has elk hunting experience that you can go help and less focus on getting your own tag and doing your own hunt. Like that's not
Hmm.
short term. It's not what you want, but long term, it's gonna be the absolute best thing you can do, right? Um, offer your time, offer your help to go help someone, but you're learning from them along the way versus maybe just being a little more selfish of like, well, I want to kill an elk. I'm gonna go get an elk tag. I'm gonna go hunt myself. I have, you know, a go hunt subscription and an online course. Like, I'm not saying you can't do that, but I would trade all of that in a heartbeat to go on an elk hunt without a tag and just watch and help someone who actually knows what they're doing. So yeah, I'd echo a lot of what you said, Steve. But yeah, for you, Ben, I'm super curious.
Yeah, what you just said makes a lot of sense, and you can look at you can listen to podcasts. There's 700 episodes between the Monday Minutes and the Hunt Backcountry podcast that you can draw information from and listen to and learn from others that have done all these things before you. But learning from like someone individually, like on an individual level, is really, I think, probably the most helpful way and best way to gain knowledge and to learn from their experience. Um, but I think some people uh, have the thought that they can reach out and contact these like old time hunters or experienced people and just get all the knowledge that they have and just get it like downloaded to them and just kind of they may not be thinking of it this way, but just kind of leech off of that person's experience without offering anything in return. So what you said about offering to go on a hunt and help someone out and pack for someone or just to add value to them, that's in life, that's the best way to exchange value is to offer something in return to someone. So just having that openness to expend some effort and energy to help out someone to maybe offer something else in another part of life, or another hunt. Like say if you hunt in a specific area in part of the country and you want to come hunt in Alaska, find out what that person in Alaska, what they're interested in, if they're interested in hunting like where you are, and offer something in return. And that's a great way to transfer knowledge between people, and people will be more willing to help out if you're offering some value to them as well.
I like it.
Anything else on knowledge? I mean, I feel like we actually covered that fairly well.
Yeah, I mean it's just a massive. It is everything. Um, that you can develop a strategy on how you want to acquire it, and I think it's important to understand how you personally learn. Like I have to experience. I can't read a book. Right, my mind wanders instantly. I can barely listen to a podcast. Frankly, just same deal. Like I'll hear someone will say something. This happens in this conversation right now. Like Ben, you'll say a statement, then my mind just starts like thinking about that statement. Then I'm not listening to the rest of what's being said. Um, so I have to be very like in person, physical example. Like I learn way more from like being with somebody on a hunt or an experiencing a hunt than I ever will from a podcast. So that for me, I just know I'm more efficient in my learning that way. For other people, they can really process, reading, hearing, things like that. So identify your strengths and weaknesses, and then just make a plan to go forward with it. And like I said, there's no lack of information these days. I think I just encourage people to, when they do hear it, I think that it's very good to have a um, kind of a questioning mindset to something. So just because you hear something, don't just accept it. Just try to apply it. Like think about how that would work for you, or try to find flaws in it. I think just having a very like inquisitive, questioning mindset is a good way as you're at least that's how I do it. When I'm learning something, um, just be thinking about it, right? Like not, yeah, it's kind of hard to articulate, but definitely just apply what you're learning to how you're going to use it so that you can actually retain it.
And seek out information from people who don't just go on feelings or on previously held beliefs. An example of that is having Form on the podcast, going over ballistics
Mm.
and wound channels and ballistics in general, because there's a lot of uh, misconceptions and FUD lore out there. So and that's an any part of or any aspect of these things we're talking about, whether that's fitness or gear or maybe archery, but in hunting in general. So you really need to sort through old information and seek out those that are really looking and have found what actually works and what isn't just beliefs that are held because they've been around a long time.
Yeah, it's a whole another subtopic of like sometimes even though someone could be an expert in something, doesn't mean they actually know what they're talking about. Like it's kind of sometimes you're just repeating what you've been told, but you've never really questioned it, right? Like calibers is a great one. Like, well, everyone says I need this. That's what the experts say. That's what I use. That works for me, but maybe there's a better way to do it. Um, so that's where that kind of always be questioning and inquisitive aspect to this, I think, is really important.
Yeah, look where the information is coming from. If they have an interest in a specific company, if they're
Yeah.
sponsored, if they're biased, because you can often most podcasts or commercially available material and information has a sponsor behind it, and so that's where your guys' podcast and Jay's podcast with the Mindful Hunter and a few forums that don't have an agenda that are sponsored by a certain optics company or anything like that are valuable.
For those two thoughts are one, forums are a great freaking example of you have no like you could they're great, but you better take everything you read with a pound of salt, right? Like you have
Hmm.
no idea who the person is on the other side of that keyboard, who typed that. Like someone could make a statement and you go, "Oh, I read that online." I was like, that person's like they've done one hunt in their life, right? Um, there's a lot of that. So you definitely got to take everything on forums with a lot of question. Like read it, think about it, but then apply it. Um, and then yeah, going back to certainly I would say 95% of the information you're getting from within the industry is going to always have a heavy bias to it. That's an unfortunate reality. It's a big reason why I want to do the experience project was to cut through all that BS stuff. There's good information. There's rarely like bad information coming in, but sometimes it's kind of at best okay.
I would say with a forum that you need to spend, if you're going to get information from a forum, you need to spend a little bit of time in there. I'm really active
Mm.
on Rockslide, and as you spend time on there, you really start to see who is offering good information, and you can actually learn a ton from their the content that they share and flood lore and things that aren't right get called out pretty quickly. And so you can
Yeah,
once you sift through and realize who to pay attention to and who to listen to on a platform such as that, then that's when it becomes valuable.
yeah. Rockslide's a good example of one that it does for the most part. There's very good information on there. All right. Knowledge, strength. Strength's kind of an easy one, right?
Yeah, what did you mean by strength, Ben? I'm curious, like strength and endurance, and I don't know if I'm reading into this. Like, did you just mean physical strength?
Yeah, I meant just physical strength and in that regard, just having the fitness ability to carry out uh, a hunt in a way that you're not completely smoked and beat by the end of day one, two, three, that you can go on for a week plus and still have the capability to safely hike through mountainous terrain and carry heavy weight, and just having a fitness plan throughout the year to maintain and build strength, even just for life, is so important, because everything we do requires core stability and the ability to move just as a human moves and under load and to pick up things. it's just so valuable. And if you haven't strength trained in a while and you work out, you go into a leg day and you're absolutely smoked for 5 days. You can barely move your legs. Um, you don't want to end up on a hunt where you're that's really physical and then have a super long recovery period. So having a regular routine of weighted strength training is important, just not just for that specific strength, but for how fast you recover, which can make a huge difference on a hunt.
I think I know the answer to this, but is if hunting was my only motivation for working out, I don't know if there's enough there that I would do it year round. I'd probably be my natural procrastination style. I'd probably pick it up in June, July. Um, but for me, I'm just I feel better. I'm a better person when I work out year round. Is motivation, is hunting your strictly motivation for you, Ben, or is it, um, or to me that there's a bigger picture here for me with fitness of just my own life, right? Like my own quality of life.
Yeah, just having a longevity and your capability like over your entire lifetime, I think is super important. I know for me that is, and I'm not that old, but I'm 41, and I look around at a lot of my peers and people in the similar age group, and there's so many people that they're past their prime, even by their early 40s, and you just start to go downhill so quick if you're not using your body and I think that I might have said on the last podcast, but the more you do, the more you can do, and over time, uh, you naturally will lose muscle mass, you'll lose bone density, but you can slow those things down. And if you start at a level that is fairly high for you, not comparing yourself to others, but for your body type, you're strong and capable for your body type, that's going to last longer into the future. And so that's really important to me to be able to that I think for myself, that's my greatest asset is to take care of myself so um, that I place more value on that than any monetary goal or or anything in the future. If you take care of yourself now, you're going to be able to perform when you're 60, 70, 80 years old in a way that allows a much higher quality of life. And so that is really my main motivation is to maintain that capability as long as possible. And hunting is just almost a side note to that goal. And that could go in a lot of different directions and lead down
Yeah.
a whole rabbit hole of topics.
Yeah.
I was reminded of that like this weekend we were hanging out with some neighbors, chatting with neighbors, and one of my neighbors is super handy. He's always working on projects around the house and like the guy who's almost wanting his wife to come up with a project, right? Just because he enjoys, doing them. And I was talking with my wife and I was like, man, I love doing that stuff too. I just don't have the time. Like I don't understand how he does it, right? Like how does he always have the time to be doing this, changing that, working on whatever around the house, or they also have like an extra vehicle, like a fun Jeep, and he's working on that, doing projects, and like I don't get how he does it. Like I love all that stuff. I don't have any time for it. And I realize it's because that is his like he doesn't have something else, right? He's not training, he's not working out, he's not going on adventures, he's not whatever. And when you realize that, it's like, well, now, duh, obviously I get it. But it is funny how you can, if you begin to make comparisons or like question time, like I refuse to not be active consistently, not only for training, but just because I enjoy it, for longevity, for getting outside, whatever. And there's 5 to 10 hours a week of time that I quote unquote don't have to do a house project because I'm outside physically doing something, right? And it was just interesting to me, like to even realize that this weekend of It is true. You have to make time and you make choices day in and day out with how you spend your time. And going back to everything you said, Ben, of like longevity and capability, and like you mentioned, placing more value on that than you do things even financially or monetarily. Like, heck yeah, you could stop training and stop going on adventures and make a lot more money. You've purposely chosen not to, right? So everything is a choice, especially when it comes down to time and especially when you start comparing and looking at, well, other people do this, how come I can't do that? It's like, well, what are they also you can look at what they are doing that you're not, but you also have to look at what they're not doing that you are. And then you have to ask yourself, do you want to make that trade?
100%. That, yeah, very well said, Mark. That is definitely the case. You need to really prioritize and figure out what you want to give your effort and energy to. And a concept that I think that works well for me is blocking out specific time periods, because it's really easy to get busy just with life and letting things take longer than they should, and not putting emphasis on we're talking about fitness and strength and endurance right now, and to really build upon those things, you need to devote the amount of time. So if you can block out a time period for getting a certain aspect of work done, and projects around the house, and then blocking out that fitness time as well. That's a good way of making sure that things get done, and that aren't neglected just because your time is taken up by mundane everyday life.
You put strength and then endurance. How do you differentiate between the two?
Yeah, so endurance is, I think, almost more vital. Well, it's not more vital, but it's a huge component of a backcountry hunt. We're not doing a super intense physical work on a hunt. And there may be a time that you need a burst of energy, but it's mostly a zone two endurance effort over the course of days or a week or 2 weeks, and having a high level of cardiovascular fitness, and a high VO2 max, and a high aerobic threshold. All those things will contribute to being able to operate at a fairly high level without burning out, without getting into that anaerobic phase where you can only last so long. So having uh, your cardiovascular fitness at a level that allows for that is it's, I think, one of the more important parts of say like a multi-day pack out, so that you can just continue day after day without burning out. The only way to really train endurance is uh, to spend the time. You can't just go and do a CrossFit workout or do a HIIT workout and expect your endurance to increase significantly. That may sharpen the tip of the spear on a cardiovascular base and an aerobic fitness base, but you really need that base to begin with. And so having putting in the time to do longer efforts throughout the year is where you're really gonna to build that.
Yeah, that's it's one of the few things that there's no there is no shortcut. There, endurance requires to be able to endure long things, you have to do long things and you have to do long things consistently over time. And yeah, it's an unfortunate when you're juggling time, it's an unfortunate reality to this is you just gotta go, you know, 3 to 4 days a week, do at least 1 hour long activities of hiking or biking or, you know, what are some of the specific things that you do?
So throughout the winter, I spend a lot of time in snow sports. So I split board. which is a great zone two activity, as we're often out for 6, 8 hours a day, skinning up mountains and riding lines. And then I'll skate ski and classic backcountry ski. Um, and so Nordic skiing is an amazing way in the wintertime to build that aerobic threshold and get the zone two in, and you can do intervals and do more high intensity workouts with that as well. So that I think that's where a lot of hunters fall short, is in the wintertime. They don't necessarily have activities that can build upon those things. I see a lot of people start to lose a bit of fitness over the winter. They put on some weight. Um, and it's only in the springtime when the snow starts to melt that they're able to get out and hike and train more. But I think that's super important to have year-round activities that interest you and that you can maybe do with your family or your spouse as well. Because we spend so much time away in the fall hunting that we need to make up for that throughout the rest of the year. And if you can do that with some sort of fitness activity, everyone benefits a lot from that.
Yeah, absolutely. Mark?
Yeah, I mean, you guys, I think, covered it well. What goes back to fitness, strength, and endurance both with me is just like everything else we said. Don't just have a short-term mindset or a short-term goal. Think over the years. It's just like knowledge. It's just the process, right? So it's super easy to look at fitness and, there's a 30-day challenge, or I signed up for a 6 or 10 week training program or whatever. But think over the years, think long term, just like everything else. Refine your strengths, but don't neglect your weaknesses and improve those. And it's the typical, you probably overestimate what you can do in 6 or 10 weeks, but you underestimate what you can do in 6 or 10 years. So you may be unfit right now. You may feel terrible right now. You may not be able to go do anything like the hunts that we've been describing, like these high level hunts this year. But what can you do, in 2, 3, 4, 5 years? Way more than you think. And that applies to physically as well. So, yeah, I think it's just, again, another example of like how you look at it, changing your mindset and letting your mindset change your actions is going to change the outcome. You just have to be patient and give it time. Skill sets were next. I think this one obviously ties really closely with knowledge, knowledge and skills going together. But when I look at those two, as we've said, knowledge is one thing. It could just be facts. It could just be in the head. Skills is knowing how to apply knowledge. It's practical. It's in the field. It's executing. It's making actions that are informed by knowledge, but you're applying it as a skill. I think that, again, just broadly, that's how I see it. But there's probably different ways to look at it as well.
I think this is a really enjoyable part of backcountry hunting, is because there's multiple skill sets that you need, and they're all fun to do on their own. Like say shooting and long range shooting and precision, that's a skill set you can develop. Ultralight camping and using those ultralight items in a way that allows you to use them efficiently. All these different things are on their own, they're almost their own activity. And so that's where I find enjoyment, kind of obsessing over each of these areas and working on improving how I use those and the capabilities in each of those areas.
Yeah, skill set is to me, that's actual. There's one thing to have like something you read in a book, but then there's a whole nother thing to be able to like take that and apply it to like what you're doing. Like that's like actual knowledge of something. You've learned it and now you've applied it and then you've processed it from there. And yeah, there's no shortcut to skill sets, like, and you cannot have a skill without experiencing it. So you just have to start hunting and, again, be mindful, like everything, of here's the skills I'm lacking. Here's the things I need to work on. Uh, Go acquire how to do that and then go apply that to, you know, that specific hunt. Like this hunt requires me to, you know, have a skill set of pitching a tent in very high winds or um, of climbing very technical terrain to get to these animals. I mean, you can really easily go look at here's the hunt I'm doing, here's the adventure I'm doing, here's all the things I think I need a skill for, and then go go start acquiring those.
Yeah, and the off season is a good time to focus like on those areas individually
Hmm.
and take shooting for instance. Just dive into uh, learning about it and doing that activity and just kind of obsess over one of those things for a time,
Yeah.
and until you develop the knowledge and skills to that you feel capable with that, and then move on to something else. And it makes the off season interesting because you can just go through different obsessions and diving into different areas. And then you can start to mesh those together to apply them for a hunt.
Yeah. I like that kind of itemized. All right, here's, just sit down right now with a piece of paper, write out like, here's 5 things I need to do. All right, the next 2 weeks, I'm going to work on this thing and then this thing and then this thing. Right. So that when you get into the hunt, you go, okay, you know, I've already developed these. Now I can go apply these. I did these in my backyard. I did these on a quick trip, an hour from my house. Now here I'm on a hunt. And I mean, the skill set just shooting in angled high elevation mountain terrain, right? That's a skill set you need to do. You can't replicate that shooting at a flat range, in your town, right? You need to get up and go experience that. So just identify things you need and go get them.
Yeah, I think the hunt may expose areas where you need to develop more skills, but the hunt should not be, you should not have the goal of developing skills on the hunt, right? Um, it's all a pursuit of the hunt is the event. The hunt is the Super Bowl. The hunt is the thing. It's up to you to work in the off season, to work outside of the hunt, to practice essentially, right? Like development. Like no one's going into a big game, a big event, whatever, trying to develop skill. They're trying to apply skill. And yeah, how many ways? Like we're all short on time. Some of us are short on opportunity, access, terrain, etc. But there are ways. There are things you can do. Um, and so it just, again, it's intentionality and some effort and some time. And I love, yeah, I'll just echo, like, I love what you said, Ben, about breaking out skills into different things. We've said this so many times. Like, if you're new to backpack hunting, separate backpacking and hunting. They culminate, they go together. It's one of the reasons, like you even said, Ben, like it's one of the things that makes mountain hunting so great. It's like the culmination and intersection of all these different skills, these different things that are really pursuits in and of themselves that come together towards the single goal of a mountain hunt. But it is okay to separate them. It's okay to like just focus on getting familiar in mountainous terrain, to just focus on shooting, to just focus on living in the backcountry and backpacking, right? Do all that and separate those things and develop those things and then bring them together for the hunt itself.
Yeah, I think that's the essence of thriving is the culmination of bringing all those different areas together and then applying them and and feeling like that you're capable and you're able to focus on the hunt in a way that is gonna bring you the most success and help you to get the most out of an adventure that's gonna change you if you let it.
So much of what we've talked about, There's one thing to, we've said this already a bunch of times, but it's basically, it's one thing to go do this stuff, but it all takes forethought, right? Like you have to, none of this is going to happen accidentally. You have to sit down and make mental notes, put notes on your phone, write them on a piece of paper. Um, you have to be very intentional about all this stuff, right?
Yeah, anything that's worth having needs that intentionality. You're not going to have a great marriage just by um, just doing nothing. It takes
Yeah.
intentionality to do that
Uh,
or to build a business. And the same with backcountry hunting.
for anyone listening, it's just like, okay, just the next time you're, I don't know, sitting on the toilet, you got like 5 minutes to yourself, like just pull out your phone and just start jotting down notes, right? Um, you gotta, you have to be intentional about this. It's not going to come by accident. Yeah. Okay. So mindset is the next to last thing on here. Um, I guess, Ben, you could take that a lot of different directions. You wrote this down. What did you mean by mindset?
A part of mindset is being present in the moment and having taken care of everything prior to the hunt so that your mind isn't elsewhere. I think that's a super important part of it. Not being distracted by anything left unattended back at home or if you've neglected something that is going to affect your hunt, if you forgot to set up your inReach so that you can't, or if you forgot to download maps for an area, just preparing those really, um, those things that are actionable beforehand, but you can't do once you're in the field, goes a long way towards getting you in the keeping you in the right mindset to stay focused on the hunt.
So essentially like eliminating any distraction, right? Like I don't know if this is just me getting older, but I've definitely realized that mental energy is a real thing. And what your thoughts go to, it matters. And on a hunt, hopefully you can be present. But every little thing that robs you of being present, every little thing that is eating and taking a piece of your mental energy is potentially taking you away from being fully present. So it's like, yeah, just how do you free up the mental energy to thrive in the backcountry, to pursue this hunt, to be fully present, to make memories? Well, you just have to eliminate distractions and make sure that anything that could be a distraction is either put out of mind or I think more effectively just taken care of so it can be out of mind versus you trying to force yourself to not think about it or worry about it.
Yeah, 100% Mark. That's a super vital part for me as well.
The last on the list, again, I have no idea, Ben, if this was intentional. It's last in the conversation, and we're just going to touch on it quick, is gear. And maybe people thought we were going to go here in the beginning. Like thriving in the backcountry is all about having a dialed system and the best this and whatever. But as I'm sure people have heard by now, like really all of these other things are more important than gear. And as part of the experience project, we've said like, hey, some gear matters, some gear doesn't when you look at that specific item, but really the bigger the bigger way to thrive in the backcountry is to have a cohesive system of gear that's tried, tested, and trusted so that it becomes about the hunt and not about the gear. So, I mean, that's how I look at this with thriving in the backcountry is, hey, there's no one single piece of gear that's going to allow me to thrive. It's having things that I know, that I trust, that don't affect the hunt in a negative way, so that I'm enabled to just be present and actually thrive on the hunt. That's how I look at it with gear.
Yeah, I think of gear as an accessory to everything that came before this that we spoke about. So gear isn't the primary. We need the gear, but it's not the primary way that we enjoy an experience or are successful. It's an accessory to the knowledge that we have, to the experience, to the mindset, to the fitness. And so if you view gear in that way, just like you said, It allows you to seamlessly integrate that gear into your hunt, and you're not having to think about how to use something, or if you're fighting with something that's not working right. So that's where uh, really taking the time to think about what specific challenges you're going to encounter on the hunt, and then researching the gear that will best serve that purpose. Um, and that's for me is it can be an enjoyable thing to obsess over gear in the off season, and test gear and go through stoves to see what's more efficient and try different sleep systems, and then when you get on the hunt, not have to think about it because it's working for that. And one thing that I've really come to realize over the years is that one piece of gear does not suit every situation. And so over time, acquiring a quiver of equipment, and it doesn't even have to be the most expensive or best gear, but just gear that suits a certain type of weather or terrain well is more important than having the Swaro BTX, which is the best glassing option for, if someone was hunting Coues deer, but that might not be the best option for an elk hunt in timber. So just because something is the best doesn't mean it's the best suited. So having a variety of gear in each category to be able to choose from can be really important.
Yeah, well said. Steve, anything for you?
Yeah, gear. So gear's a funny one. I like that approach, Ben, of it's an accessory. Like if everything else doesn't come first, then it doesn't matter what you have. And we try gear is, especially with podcasts and this information age we're in, gear is probably talked about, certainly way out of proportion to all these other aspects. But it's easy to talk about. It's fun to talk about. It is also talked about because that's what companies are selling, right? So there's money behind people buying gear. Obviously, we're right included in that. It was a really interesting challenge just for this project of sitting down and going through the gear list. Like, all right, what are we going to actually spend time on, support with videos? What are we going to kind of gloss over? And there's, as you well know, Ben, like once you have your gear dialed, it is like what is it? When you know how to use it, when you don't have to worry about it, when you can just focus on the hunt and be present and know the stuff that you have, on your body and your backpack is going to work for you. Man, that's a nice place to be. So it's an accessory, but it is important um, at the same time because when it is all dialed in, it's fantastic. So Mark and I have been like the last few years, I think I've actually intentionally kind of like sabotaged some of my stuff because it's like things are so easy now gear wise that there's like no challenges. So it's like, I'm gonna not pack a puffy jacket and see what happens. Like I'll figure it out. Um, yeah, just don't obsess over it to the point of like, oh, especially because gear costs money. Don't go crazy, but through experience, you'll figure out what you need, what you don't need. Like you said, Ben, some gear's suited well for this or that. Like with shelters, I love having the tarp bivy combo, and then also a good like 3+ 4 season tent for when the hunt requires that.
That all makes sense to me, and it's the way I approach it as well. And just like when we were talking about fitness, like high intensity interval training can sharpen the tip of the spear of a large endurance base. Really premium gear, and the best gear in whatever category, optics or shelters or any of the categories that we use for hunting, they can really just sharpen just the tip of the spear of what our capability is. So if you didn't have that base of knowledge and experience of how to use gear properly, it wouldn't really help you. But once you have that, it's just one of those areas that you can optimize for, and will really just allow you to sharpen that edge of what you're doing. and give you that. It may be a 5% increase in capability, say with a really premium optic, but when you already have the skills and knowledge below that, that really makes a big difference. It just adds that much more to your effectiveness.
Yeah, I said the best gear in the world doesn't matter if you don't have everything we've talked about for the last hour and a half all dialed in. But when you've got all that dialed in, and then you can refine your gear, it's it certainly enables thriving in the backcountry you're gonna be able to execute things at a very high level.
Well, there you go, guys. I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. Be sure to check out the links in the show description. We will recap some of the key takeaways and topics discussed in this conversation, and there'll also be links to previous podcasts with Ben and other resources. So check that out. And as always, if you have any questions for us, you can send an email to podcast@exomountaingear.com. Thanks for tuning in and supporting the show, and we'll talk to you soon.